Elvis Presley's journey from a humble beginnings in Tupelo, Mississippi, to becoming the king of rock and roll is a tale of raw talent, relentless touring, and a dash of luck. Yet few know the turbulent start to his career, marked by grueling travels and a manager who would become as much a fixture as the guitar in his hands. In 1954, just after concluding his stint at the Grand Ole Opry, Elvis joined the Louisiana Hayride, a less formal country music show in Shreveport. This was a turning point. Gone were the rigid rules of the Opry. Here, Elvis could let loose, captivating audiences with his electrifying performance. Every Saturday night, Elvis and the Blue Moon Boys would head to Shreveport, only to spend the week crisscrossing the South. Their schedule was a patchwork of bookings, from big venues like the Big D Jamboree in Dallas to makeshift stages like Pontiac showrooms and even American Legion's halls. They played in places as unusual as feed mills, using the back of a truck as a stage. It was exhausting work, but Elvis's star was rising fast. His 5 Sun Records albums were selling well, and he was quickly becoming the headliner. His charisma was undeniable, but it also made other performers wary. They couldn't compete with his crowd-pulling ability, and jealousy simmered beneath the surface. The road was unforgiving. Elvis drove a bright pink Cadillac, but it lasted only until a wheel bearing caught fire in Hope, Arkansas. Then there was the makeshift trailer built by his father Vernon, a patchwork of plywood painted pink which became their mobile home of sorts. It was a symbol of their nomadic life, and eventually it met the same fate as the car, abandoned on the roadside after another flat tire. Amid these challenges, Elvis's personal life was in turmoil. Dixie Locke, the girl he intended to marry, lost interest as he transformed from a quiet church-goer into a rock and roll sensation. Elvis had a string of girlfriends across the South, while his mother Gladys worried endlessly, demanding nightly calls. Their arguments were frequent, but Elvis remained dutiful, knowing the importance of family connections. As his fame spread, Elvis caught the attention of Pat Boone, a clean-cut teen idol from Columbia University. Boone, who had recently hit the charts with a cover of a Black song, was initially skeptical of Elvis's rise. When they met, Boone was struck by Elvis's rough demeanor and lack of eye contact, but Elvis's performance left him speechless, albeit for the wrong reasons. Boone noted that Elvis's authenticity was his downfall when he spoke, but on stage he was unstoppable. Despite their differences, Boone's respect for Elvis's talent was clear. Backstage, Elvis was a whirlwind of energy, transcending his humble roots on stage. He moved with the confidence of a man who had tasted success, the very success he had dreamed of since his early days. But success came with its own set of challenges, and one of the most significant was the arrival of Colonel Tom Parker. Colonel Parker was a force to be reckoned with, a man who saw Elvis as a prize to be captured. He had a history in the music business, having promoted artists like Eddie Arnold and Hank Snow. Parker moved with the stealth of a predator, insinuating himself into Elvis's life over months. He approached Elvis and his manager Bob Neal with a proposal. Parker would handle bookings and negotiate fees. Elvis, still young and inexperienced in business, agreed, signing a contract that seemed favorable at first but was, in reality, a trap. The contract was a masterpiece of manipulation. Elvis was required to pay Parker $2,500 upfront and commit to 100 concerts, each paying just $200, with Parker taking a hefty cut. The deal was open-ended, allowing Parker to change the terms at will. Elvis, lacking the assertiveness to negotiate, accepted the terms, giving Parker control over his talent. Despite the unfairness of the deal, signing with Parker was a pragmatic move for the Presleys. Their social status demanded respect and guidance from those in higher echelons. In the segregated South, breaking into the upper world required navigating a maze of authority figures. Parker, despite his questionable ethics, offered a path forward, even if it meant being treated as a commodity. For Elvis, the choice was between staying in the shadows and taking a chance on a guide who could, for better or worse, steer him toward stardom. Once upon a time in the South where small-time traders thrived, a man named Colonel Tom Parker emerged as a master of deals. He was known for making shrewd bargains, especially when it came to music and talent. Elvis Presley and his family recognized Parker as a slick talker, but they also saw the potential for big money. They accepted his help even if it meant giving up some control over Elvis's career. Parker knew how to make a splash. He wasn't like other managers who would take a small percentage of the earnings. He went all in, offering big ideas and bigger promises. He convinced Gladys Presley, Elvis's mother, to sign over Elvis's contract to RCA Records for a then unheard of sum of $35,000. This deal was like a golden ticket, opening doors for Elvis to reach a national audience. With the RCA contract in hand, Parker took Elvis to New York City in 1956. This move was a game changer. Elvis's first RCA record, Heartbreak Hotel, became a massive hit, topping the charts by April. His first album also reached #1 and stayed there for 10 weeks. Elvis was invited to Hollywood for a screen test and signed a movie deal. He started touring in bigger venues, captivating audiences across the country. The money poured in. In just 1 month, April, Elvis earned about $77,000. Adjusted for today's inflation, that's like earning $500,000 in a month. Of course, after managing fees, commissions, and expenses, Elvis kept less than half of that. Still, it was a fortune. With this newfound wealth, Elvis treated his parents to a new house and bought himself a fancy Cadillac. Elvis was overwhelmed by the sudden fame. He told people he was scared by how fast things were happening. Outside his comfort zone, he was both celebrated and scrutinized. His song Hound Dog caused a stir on Milton Berle's show when he performed it with a provocative dance move. This performance ignited a national controversy. Many people, especially middle-class and middle-aged Americans, were outraged. They saw Elvis as vulgar and a bad influence on youth. Elvis defended his style, pointing out that the woman dancing with him on stage was also revealing, but the backlash was intense. Preachers, in particular, condemned his performance as immoral. Elvis felt hurt by the criticism, especially since it came from people he respected. He tried to explain that his music and dance were natural expressions of the rock and roll genre. The controversy was not just about music or dance, it touched on deeper issues of race and culture. Some people saw Elvis as crossing boundaries that should remain untouched. He was labeled as primitive and disgusting, with some even calling him an animalistic nigger bop. These harsh words came from groups like the Alabama White Citizens Council, who feared the changing times and the blurring of racial lines in music. Through it all, Elvis remained grounded. He knew his roots and tried to stay true to himself. Despite the criticism, he continued to perform and record, becoming an iconic figure in music history. His journey from a small-town boy to a national sensation was nothing short of remarkable, fueled by shrewd business deals and an undeniable talent that captured the hearts of millions. Elvis Presley's journey was one filled with contrasts. On one hand, the cultural elite saw him as talentless, someone who didn't fit their narrow view of art due to his lack of formal training and unconventional style. Yet, among teenagers, he was a hero. These young fans, shaped by the comfort of the 1950s but restless for change, found in Elvis a voice for their unspoken frustrations. They loved him more than their parents, who were often shocked by the rebellious image Elvis projected. To them, Elvis was a symbol of the restlessness they felt towards the idealized world of suburban perfection. James Dean had already paved the way as the rebel hero in movies like Rebel Without a Cause. But Elvis became the real-life embodiment of this rebellion for many young people. His music, especially Hound Dog, became an anthem for those yearning for something more than the mundane lives depicted in TV shows like Betty Crocker and Father Knows Best. Yet, Elvis himself didn't fully understand the music he was creating. To him, it was just a means to an end, a way to earn money and gain acceptance, unlike the troubled souls he saw in Dean's characters. Elvis's image clashed with the expectations of those in charge of presenting him to the public. When he appeared on The Steve Allen Show, the show's host, Steve Allen, tried to tame Elvis, making him perform with a basset hound and dressing him in a tuxedo to play down his rough appeal. This portrayal was not just a misstep in showcasing Elvis's talent, but also a personal humiliation for him and his family. The Presley family had always struggled against being seen as hillbillies, a term they associated with ignorance and poverty. Being made into a caricature was a painful reminder of their hard-fought efforts to be seen as respectable. Despite these challenges, Elvis was aware of the risks involved in stepping out of his comfort zone. His early interactions with New York City's elite, where he tried to fit in with mannerisms that seemed forced and out of place, showed his struggle. Yet there was also a growing determination within him. After the humiliating experience on Steve Allen's show, Elvis took charge of his recording sessions. He insisted on getting every song just right, showing a newfound perfectionism. This was a turning point where Elvis started to assert his artistic control. With the help of his manager, Colonel Parker, Elvis began to separate business from art. The Colonel promised not to interfere with Elvis's creative process, allowing him the freedom to express himself. This newfound freedom was crucial. Elvis started directing his recordings, ensuring that his music reflected his true self. Sessions became less about following orders and more about bringing his rich, complicated vision to life. Songs like Hound Dog, Don't Be Cruel, and Any Way You Want Me showcased his growth, making him the most successful artist RCA had ever signed. Throughout this period, photographers like Alfred Wertheimer captured Elvis in a different light. These photos showed a young man caught between innocence and stardom, someone who was both excited and overwhelmed by his sudden fame. The images portrayed Elvis as thoughtful and tentative, a contrast to the confident star he was becoming. These moments of vulnerability humanized Elvis, reminding everyone that behind the flash and glamour, he was still a young man figuring out his place in the world. Elvis's story is one of a man who, despite being told he had no talent, found a way to express himself and connect with millions. He navigated the treacherous waters of fame, corporate control, and public expectations, always striving to stay true to himself. His journey teaches us about the power of perseverance, the importance of staying authentic, and the impact one person can have on an entire generation. Even when faced with ridicule and attempts to diminish him, Elvis rose above, becoming a beacon of hope and rebellion for those who felt lost in a conformist world.